glad that you are back with us this morning as we begin another day. As we're continuing through our 40 days in the book of Mark, we have made it finally to chapter 14. You have made it finally to chapter 14. And the reading today is just a little bit longer, verses 1 through 26. But now we have finally come to, I guess, what you might consider the main event, the time where we are in the final days. Today, you're going to read about the Last Supper. You're going to read about the events just before the Last Supper. And now Mark is going to slow down the process of Jesus and the timeline just a little bit. But it's going to feel a little like Mark is speeding up because there is going to be a whole lot of information that is included in these next few days of readings. And we are now just a bit over a week before Easter. And so it is timely that we are now finally at this time period of the Last Supper, the betrayal, the trials, the crucifixion, and eventually the resurrection, as we celebrate those things as the church has celebrated now for 2,000 plus years. One thing that I will say is that if you've not already done so, now is the time to make sure that you go to christtable.today. Everybody who's donated is going to get one of these Bible studies that we're going to begin a week from Sunday on April 4th. Easter, we'll begin this Bible study. We'll continue it on for 50 days. I want to send you a copy of this. If you are unable to give, then please message me, reach out to me in some way, and let me know, and we'll still make sure that you have the materials available that you'll need to participate in the Bible study. Actually, I'm going to package these things up today and they'll go out in the mail tomorrow so that everybody will have them in time to begin the Bible study in a week. So looking forward to doing that with you. Now, today in our reading, we are in Mark chapter 14, as I said, verses 1 through 26. We're going to cover about half of that, just a little less than half of that this morning in our study. So it was now 2 days before Passover and the festival of the unleavened bread. And so at this time in Jewish culture, they had kind of combined both of these celebratory and memorable events into one large celebration and memorial. So Passover is a celebration and the memory of the freedom from Egypt, where the death angel passed over. Pharaoh said, fine, you can leave here, and they begin their journey into the promised land. The festival of unleavened bread is a remembrance of their time where they were exiting quickly from Egypt and didn't even have time to allow their bread to rise. And so both of these events were tied together historically, and eventually both of these festivals became tied together as well. So the leading priests, the text tells us in Mark, and the teachers of the religious law were still looking for an opportunity to capture Jesus secretly and to kill him. Now, the reason they were looking to do it secretly and capture him and kill him was because they did not want there to be an uprising. They didn't want there to be a riot. And so they didn't want any of this happening during the Feast of the Passover or during the Festival of Unleavened Bread. This was the main pilgrimage to Jerusalem. It was expected that every adult male would be in Jerusalem for this event. And so hundreds of thousands of extra people would descend on Jerusalem during this time. And it was a very volatile situation because of the oppression of Rome. They were really kind of unhappy every time they showed up in Jerusalem, seeing this occupation that was going on by the outside forces. And so it was already kind of a kindling situation, and each and every year only took just a small match in order to light that. But if there were riots, if there was an uprising, and if it had come from something that the priests and the teachers of the religious law had done or could have controlled, then their necks would have been on the line for it. They would have lost their position of power. And so they were kind of in bed with Rome because Rome was essentially allowing them to lead and make decisions and be in charge as long as peace was kept. Rome just simply wanted people to pay taxes and wanted there to be peace. And so as long as that was maintained, Rome was happy And so the priests and the teachers of the religious law had a lot of leeway in order to do what they wanted to do in order to maintain that peace. Jesus, as a rabble rouser, from their perspective, was seen as being way too much of a risky proposition, because people were following him. People were getting ideas that were over and against the ideas that the priests and the teachers of the religious law were teaching, and they thought that there might be an uprising that would take them out of power. And they didn't want to see that. They might have said with their mouths that they wanted there to be a Messiah and they wanted Rome to be overthrown, but they wanted still to be in power and it's still in control. And so they really didn't want the Messiah to come. They didn't want Rome to be overthrown unless they were the ones who, at the end of the skirmish, were still in control and still in power. And so, as it is oftentimes in the world, in politics, even in church, it was a battle for power, and the leading priests and the teachers of the religious law were going to stop at nothing to win it. And so that's why they were looking, as the text says here in Mark, for an opportunity to capture Jesus secretly and to kill him. But not during the Passover celebration, they all agreed, because the people may riot. So meanwhile, while all of this is going on in Jerusalem, just outside of Jerusalem, Jesus is in Bethany at the home of Simon, a man who had previously had leprosy. Now, here in Mark, this story happens in Bethany. It happens just before the Last Supper. There is a man, Simon, whose home Jesus is in. Simon previously had leprosy. These details are a bit different in some of the other Gospels. If you're reading in Luke or reading in Matthew or reading in John, in one of them, the location is different. It's not in Bethany. In another one, it's not in Simon's house. It's actually in Mary, Martha, and Lazarus's house. In another one, Simon isn't Simon a leper, but it's Simon who is a Pharisee. And so sometimes in this, it becomes difficult for us to understand and reconcile these things. And why do I point that out? Well, I don't point that out in order to diminish your trust in Scripture. What I do is I just simply point that out to say there are some difficult places in the Bible where we come to them and sometimes things don't add up or don't make sense. We need to just face those things rather than ignore those things. And there are probably a couple of different options that you can go with this that, depending on your comfort level, is equally acceptable. One of them is there were multiple places or ways in which this same event happened. Maybe he was anointed multiple times. To me, that seems a little less likely than the other option, but it's possible. Perhaps Simon the Pharisee was also previously a leper. Maybe he was staying with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, but this dinner takes place somewhere else. There are hoops that you can jump through to reconcile it. The other thing that you can say is these are eyewitness accounts, and sometimes eyewitness accounts aren't necessarily wrong, but sometimes the details aren't necessarily fully always gel with other eyewitness accounts. And it's understandable. This from here forward is a very volatile story, a very volatile situation. Memories are going to be a little convoluted, and people are going to maybe remember things differently. Well, was it in this house or in this house? I think it was in this house. Well, okay, John says it was here. Well, Matthew says Simon was actually a Pharisee. It's not Simon the leper. Well, Mark, I thought he was previously a leper. So what's the point of the matter? Well, the point of the matter is that this story has some different details in other places. And that's okay. Doesn't diminish the power of the story. Doesn't diminish the power of the importance of the Bible. And in fact, to me, it just makes it honestly all the more real and all the more believable that everybody didn't work together to get their story straight. They just told the story as they knew it from their vantage point, and that is what we have on record. Either way, just before the Passover celebration is about to begin, Jesus is in a home of Simon. While he was eating, a woman came in with a beautiful alabaster jar of expensive perfume made from essence of nard. She broke open the jar, poured the perfume over his head. Some of those at the table were indignant. Why waste such an expensive perfume? They asked. I would love to go into deep detail about just these two verses, and could probably spend several hours just talking about it. If you're interested, you can Google it. This is essentially a year or more's worth of wages of perfume. So if you make 50 grand a year, then imagine spending $50,000 on a very small bottle of perfume. If you make 100 grand, 150 grand a year, imagine spending 100 grand or 150 grand just on a very small bottle of perfume. It's likely, honestly, that this was an heirloom. People didn't go to the bank to save money. People bought things that had significant value and maybe even would go up in value with time as an investment. And so it's possible, in fact, maybe even probable, that this perfume was given to her, that it was passed down from her family, from a grandparent, a parent. We don't know, but what we know is that this was a very significant item. It was a very significant and meaningful item to her that had value beyond monetary value. This isn't just a monetary item. This is a personal item to her, something that wasn't just connected to the pocketbook, but something that was also connected to the heart and the soul. She breaks the jar, which means that there's no saving anything back from this. Once it has been opened and used, it essentially becomes worthless. From that point, many people would say that that's really the only way to get to this perfume is to break the jar. She pours the perfume over his head. One of the other versions of this says that she actually pours it over his feet. Either way, what all of them agree on is that the people who were in attendance were indignant. One of the eyewitness accounts actually points out that it was Judas himself who was indignant. Why waste such expensive perfume? Nothing done for Jesus is a waste. No matter how great or small the investment, it's an investment that always returns something greater than was originally invested. I think this story would have been in here even if the perfume that she had broken and poured over his head were from the local drugstore. You know, if it was the cheap stuff that you buy off the shelf at Walmart. I still think this story would have been in here because for Jesus, it wasn't the value of the perfume that was really the key to this story, but it was what was going on the inside of her that wasn't going on the inside of others. In the presence of Jesus, she didn't see that anything was more valuable than him. And so it's almost as though she counted this perfume as being worthless, when in the presence of Christ, everything was worthless to her. Even this, it had no comparable value. But for everybody else who was in the room, the opposite of that was true. You know, they were indignant. Why? Because this value to this perfume to them seemed to have more worth and more value than Jesus himself. And so what we really have here is a dichotomy. We have a juxtaposition, a situation of this amazing lady and everybody else who is in attendance. And she gets it right and they get it wrong. And it has nothing to do really with the value of the perfume. It has everything to do with what's going on inside. They said this could have been sold for a year's wages, and the money given to the poor. I'm calling bull on the money given to the poor thing. I don't think that they were concerned about the poor. Maybe they were trying to look good in front of Jesus, in front of each other. They were indignant because of what they saw as this being a waste. But I think that they probably would have seen it given to the poor as being a waste as well. I don't know. Clearly their hearts weren't in the right place. So they scold her harshly. Isn't it interesting how so often whenever we don't like something or we don't agree with something, rather than just come right out and be transparent about why we don't like it or why we disagree with it, which is usually something very selfish, we try to religious it up. We try to gussy it up. We shouldn't do that because that would be much better served if it were for the poor or if it were for the widows or for the orphans or for those in prison or we shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be putting our attention towards this. We should be putting our attention towards this thing. Well, the only reason that you're saying it should be put towards that thing is because you think that the people who are listening to you care more about that thing and are simply going to side with you and stop it or going to divert it. But really what it is it's just selfishness. And so often I think we have difficulty in religious circles dividing between what we really think and what we really care about and our selfishness. And this is exactly what's going on here is this is a selfish conversation and a selfish heart that is seen through the lens of what's happening with this woman. The disciples and the followers of Jesus still did not get it, but this woman did. And as we look through the New Testament, this is an aside, I'm just going to give you this for free. As we look through the New Testament, what we see is that it's always the women who get it first. It's always the women who get it first. Mary Magdalene, this woman right here, the women who are in the garden, who hear the good news of Jesus' resurrection and then are the first apostles, the first evangelists. I could go through the New Testament and talk about Chloe and Phoebe and Lydia. It's always the women who seem to get it first. Maybe the men would never get it if the women hadn't gotten it first. But Jesus replies, "Leave her alone. Why do you criticize her for doing such a good thing to me? You will always have the poor among you, and you can help them whenever you want," thus implying that they hadn't been doing much helping of the poor, but there was still time. "But you're not always going to have me here," he says. "And she has done what she could and has anointed my body for burial ahead of time." And they must have wondered what he meant by this. But I love that line, "She has done what she could." It wasn't about the expense so much. It wasn't about the perfume so much. Those things were meaningful. And of course, because it was something of high value, it had meaning. But again, I think that she would have used whatever was of high value around her that she had on hand, whether it was seen as something of value to other people or not. But she did what she could and anointed his body for burial. Verse 9, "And I tell you the truth that wherever the good news is preached throughout the world, this woman's deed will be remembered and discussed." And that came true. And then we'll finish here. "Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples, went to the leading priests to arrange to betray Jesus to them." So now what we have here is we have this set of events set in motion. I I think that there is some connection between what happens in this story and then Judas now going to the leading priest to arrange to betray Jesus to them. Especially because in one of the other tellings of this story, Judas is actually very indignant and is the one who says these things about the poor and where the money should be given and how the money could have been used in other ways. And Judas is the treasurer, and one of the other, I think it is John, but don't hold me to it, says that Judas had actually been pilfering money from the treasury. Judas says, I've had enough. This is not what I signed up for. And there's a lot actually going on behind the scenes here with Judas as well. And actually Sunday, I've been working on Sunday's message, and Sunday's message is going to center a lot on Judas and what was going on with him and why. And I'm actually really looking forward to it. So Sunday morning, 9:45 Eastern, we'll have a whole lot more to say about this, which is why I want to keep going. I don't even know how long have I 21 minutes. See, I'm already over my time. So I'm just going to have to stop. You're going to have to tune back in on Sunday, but I'm looking forward to it. It's been a long time since I've looked forward to a Sunday morning message as much as I'm looking forward to this one. So I'm just going to resist the urge now of going any deeper into what's going on with Judas, and then we'll just have to discuss it on Sunday. So what do we have here? Well, a couple of things here. Here we have another sign of who Jesus is. We see clearly who Jesus is and what he cares about and what's going on with this woman and how he interacts with her, and what he values and what he feels is important. And that's not always what the religious people value and what they consider important. Sadly, though, all of those other people who were there at dinner aren't able to make sense of it. Some of them have been with Jesus since the beginning, and yet they're still not able to make sense of it, and yet she is. And Judas seems determined to put a stop to it. More on that on Sunday, and then we'll close with this. What happens here? Well, from my point of view, the establishment is agitated. I know that text is like super small down there. Sorry about that. I had to fit a lot in there. Probably should have just made the block bigger. The establishment is agitated both by Jesus' threatening actions in the temple and his popularity with the crowd. And so these two things are causing the establishment, the religious leaders, to really feel that their control and their position is threatened. And so because of the things that Jesus has done in the temple, throwing out the money changers, the things he's teaching, as well as just his popularity with the crowd, whenever somebody sees somebody else becoming popular with folks that they want to be popular with, jealousy crops up. And this is all about jealousy and all about control. And it always is, whether it's Jesus and the temple leaders, whether it's church, whether it's what's going on in your workplace or in your family, it's all about control and all about jealousy. It's been that way since Cain and Abel. So the religious leaders now have their window. They don't want to do it during Passover, but Judas has given them their window. And so they begin to make good on their determination to do away with Jesus, who they consider to be a dangerous rabble rouser who menaces the temple and their priestly class. And he's getting in the way of, Jesus is getting in the way of the way that they believe the religious system should work. And so he is seen as being a danger to the temple processes and a danger to their positions of authority and control. I could say a lot here about how that never changes, but we're just going to leave it at that. Anyone who menaces the religious systems, the establishment, and their roles of control, so will happen to them the same that happens to Jesus. So, ChristTable.today, please take care of this. Go donate, sign up online. We just want to have you a part of what's going on and what God is doing, and he's doing some amazing things. So I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for your involvement. I'm thankful for the ways in which you continue to participate in your spiritual journey. I hope you're growing, and let me know in the comments how you're doing, what's going on. Always read them. If you have any questions or feedback, always pay attention to those as well and try to get back around to them as soon as I can. But until tomorrow, happy reading.